Hello, hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world right now. Welcome! It's Monday, start of a brand new week. I don't know how things have been for you this past weekend. Hopefully, they have been nothing but wonderful. Welcome to what is still currently known as the Untitled Hockey Podcast. My name is Sammy. It is so nice to have you with us today, and joining us, as always, is my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, my friend, Mr. Kyle. Kyle, that was a wonderful face to walk in
Hello.
on. How are we?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing today?
I am doing quite well. It's been an eventful weekend, at least as far as hockey was concerned.
Yes, quite so.
We have a lot of things to talk about. Some of them serious, and then some of them just a little bit more. Why on earth was this making news in the first place? And we do have a lot to cover today, so I think we're going to skip our puck doku for today. I know we're both on a little bit of a time frame here, and we can spend 20 to 30 minutes doing puck doku easily. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's but I will say I did take a look ahead of it. I looked at it a little bit earlier today, and it wasn't overly tough.
Okay, good.
All things considered. So I don't think you're going to have really any issues with it. I have one that is still kind of hanging out there for me that I'm unsure what to do with, but you know, I'll cover that. Maybe I'll make that into a short video that I'll do after you're gone today, and we can talk through my thought process. But
That sounds beautiful.
anyway, where we're going to start today is, of course, the biggest news to come out of the weekend. We were all waiting for this to happen. It was just more a matter of when, more than a matter of if. An Erik Karlsson deal has been done, and surprise of surprises, he's going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And there's so much to digest with this very thing. But at the very least, let's start with what we do know about it. Let's pull up the actual deal itself here, because it actually involves three teams instead of just being a straight deal between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the San Jose Sharks. The Montreal Canadiens made their way into this deal as well. So the deal itself is a monster deal, probably the biggest one that we've seen for this offseason. Starting with the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, the central piece of this, they get Erik Karlsson at a straight $10 million. San Jose did end up retaining 13% of the salary just to get that number down to an even $10 million. They also acquired Rem Pitlick from the Montreal Canadiens, as well as a draft pick and a prospect from San Jose. San Jose, in return, gets a bunch of pieces that are just culture pieces, I guess, if you want to call them that. You got Mike Hoffman from Montreal. You get Mikhail Granlund and Jan Rutta from Pittsburgh. Jan Rutta near and dear to my heart, but let's be honest, he's not going to compare with Erik Karlsson. And a first-round pick in next year's draft. Top 10 protected. That is the condition on that. Montreal may have come out of this with the best possible outcome. Not because they got anything outrageous. Like, they're in a rebuild, we know that. But Jeff Petrie making his way back to Montreal. Casey DeSmith making his way to Montreal as well. And a prospect of Nathan Legare and a 2025 second-round pick as well. And by my calculations, Montreal didn't actually retain any salaries for any parts of this deal. So, yeah, they went up in salary just a little bit, but, you know, I still think they came out of this pretty scot-free. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, the moving pieces, what's your initial reaction? What was going through your mind when you first saw this trade drop?
Okay, well, let me first state that I'm a Capitals fan, and I am not incredibly excited about this on the surface. We get to see these guys more often than not throughout the seasons, and I'm not going to remind myself, let alone anyone else, how horribly terrible the last several playoff meetings between the Penguins and the Capitals have gone. Okay, let's get that out of the way. So, my situation in this, look, I'll be honest with you, I think that Rem Pitlick was actually a very, very underrated acquisition for Pittsburgh. He was playing a boatload of minutes in Montreal for a period of time there, especially during injuries. He was playing upwards of 20 minutes of ice time a game, which is bananas. I mean, obviously, in Pittsburgh's lineup, you can see him anywhere between the second and third line, probably a third line. And I mean, if we're saying anything, maybe a fourth line player, but he's definitely going to be a good penalty killer. He's definitely going to be a solid player for their team. I personally am not a big Mikhail Granlund person. I think he's a good player. He can be a bit of a puck watcher at times, and I personally would be not particularly excited about having him on my team. If we're going with Jan Ruda, I mean, he's going to definitely give San Jose a little bit more of an anchor. They definitely need some more people. And the first round pick to them, I think, is probably the biggest thing of what San Jose got. Mike Hoffman is a nice addition too, obviously. But I mean, we've heard so many things about him being a locker room, pest, whatever the case may be.
Nightmare.
And Montreal getting Jeff Petrie back, I mean, that was pretty huge. Casey DeSmith, Nathan Laguerre, second round pick, And now let's get to the meat. Erik Karlsson. Okay.
Yeah.
My biggest situation in this is the Pittsburgh Penguins did not get any younger in this situation.
No, in fact, they got older.
Yes, and the fact of the matter too, they saved $3 million receiving last year's best offensive defenseman, which is just absolutely bananas. Let's call him a first ballot Hall of Famer, and by all stretches. So you get one of the best players in the game, especially as a defenseman, to go with an already good, if not great, Chris Letang, getting Sidney Crosby, who was going to be without Jake Gensel for a period of time to start the season. You're going to get Malkin. You've got Raquel, who's a very, very good hockey player. I am deathly afraid of this team. If they can stay healthy, if they can figure out how to keep their guys on the ice, keep them in a place where they are not going, where they can actually be competitive for the entire season, I think this team is going to be good. However, the only knock that I have against this team is the age. You have got an aging core, and again, as a Capitals fan, I know all about that. And that is going to be the linchpin, I think, this season. That is going to be the one thing that I think really hurts them throughout the entirety of the year. They have, I mean, even Jeff Carter too. I mean, Riley Smith was a decent pickup. Brian Russ had a very down year last year. But if you're looking at it, you've got a very, very top-heavy team that is old. And to be honest with you, I think their power play is going to be absolutely fantastic. I think their first line is crazy. Their second line is okay. But this is huge for the sake of their defense, but does it – and yes, I do think it makes Pittsburgh a better team, but does it make them a contender against, say, a Rangers or a Hurricanes? And my answer to that is I don't think they do. They have a good team to a borderline great team, but the contenders in the Eastern Conference are just that much better. And, I mean, Tampa, Toronto. Obviously, I think we're going to see Boston take a step back this year. I think they might even be kind of in similar positions as far as points. And I still think Pittsburgh is going to be a bottom division team to a borderline wildcard team. And they might be the third place Eastern Conference team in the finals when we get down to the playoffs.
Yeah. You touched on a lot of great things there, and all things that I wanted to discuss anyway. But it's been fascinating for me to watch over the Crosby and the Ovechkin years, just how closely aligned both of those teams have actually been. Because all the complaints that you're leveling against the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, you could also level against the Washington Capitals.
Definitely.
Their age, their stubbornness in the face of an oncoming rebuild.
Yes.
Their playoff position, their relative top-heavy nature. Like, all of these things are fascinating, and that it really does just get down to when Crosby and Ovechkin entered the league, like, those two teams have just been duking it out for however many years they've been around. Now, you're absolutely right. This team didn't get any younger by this. And this is one of the difficulties that Kyle Dubas inherited by virtue of coming to Pittsburgh. Now, I was going to make this its own topic, but this is actually far more fun to talk about. But I was kind of laughing at the idea that Kyle Dubas is taking on the GM responsibilities in addition to the president responsibilities for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I feel like part of that is he's trying to make a name for himself.
Yes.
Absolutely. But we also can't ignore the fact that he inherited a situation where he has some of the most prolific players in the last 20 years. And relatively speaking, they haven't had a lot of playoff success since, I don't know, pick a year. Like they are consistently a first or a second round team, and then we haven't seen them in a finals for goodness knows how long. But
16,
the desire is clearly still there. You're not going to walk into Pittsburgh and convince Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang and all these other names that, oh, hey, guys, by the way, I know that you've offered Pittsburgh the best hockey it's seen since Mario Lemieux, but maybe it's time for us to think about hanging it up, and maybe we're going to start entering rebuild. No, he was given an impossible task.
It is.
And with this aging core, his job is to now keep it together and give them the best opportunity to win. Erik Karlsson was clearly his guy. Like we didn't think that he was going to go, truthfully, anywhere else. Seattle might have been in the mix, but it wasn't very likely that he was going to go anywhere besides Pittsburgh. Now, with that said, look at the cap-friendly page.
Yeah.
The average age of the Pittsburgh forward group is 31 years old.
Not
for the defense
young.
For the defense, 29 years old, and that went up because Erik Karlsson is now a Pittsburgh Penguin. This has to be a signal of the last ride for Pittsburgh, right?
Undoubtedly. You've got maybe a 1 or 2 season chance to really turn this thing around and get yourself a playoff, get yourself a successful playoff run until the gas runs out of the vehicle. And again, I'm looking at age and I'm looking at injuries right now. I mean, Crosby, Malkin. I mean, even if you're looking so far as, I mean, Chris Letang, and I hate to just say anything negative about, a stroke. I mean, you can never, ever, project something like that happening to yourself. But health problems have been an absolute, and Tristan Jarry even as well. Injury issues have been an issue for the Penguins for as many seasons as you can really think of. And you've got Erik Karlsson through 27, 28. He's going to be 38 years old by the time that his contract ends in Pittsburgh. And will Crosby, Malkin even still be? I mean, you would think that they would still be playing by that point, but when you get to that point, what are you thinking? I mean, you've even got Chris Letang another season after Erik Karlsson at 36 years old. He's going to be almost 42 years old by the time his contract ends. It's absolutely crazy how much term these defensemen have on top of the already aging group. It is it's a concerning scenario.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And before we talk about that a little bit more, just want to throw this out here. Odd Audrey on Twitch says, I don't know anything about hockey, but I'm here for it. Thank you for joining us today. Audrey, we are here to educate as much as possible.
Yes.
Especially for the people that actually don't know anything about hockey. You're mentioning age and contracts and everything, and you're absolutely right. I mean, Crosby, 2 years left. He's going to be 38 when he comes around for a new deal. Is it crazy to think that he's going to want to extend by a couple years? I don't think so. Same thing to be said for Malkin. He's 37, going to be 40 by the time he's up. Maybe he comes back again. And Chris Letang, 36. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's in his 40s when that deal is up. I don't think it's crazy to think that Crosby and Malkin they're going to try to last this one. They're going to try to run it as far as they possibly can, especially considering that a guy like Letang is locked up for the foreseeable future. And then you throw Erik Karlsson in the mix. I think with this group, as it exists right now, it probably isn't promising for playoff success. I think you have some journeymen and you have some guys that are aging out that want one more shot, but you touched on it. The East is absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
I said last year that the Atlantic was the hardest division in hockey, and I still stand by that. But number 2, a very close number 2, is the Metropolitan Division.
Yes.
Is you're seeing the Rangers make major pushes, and they had an incredible offseason. We'll have to talk about it at some point. The Carolina Hurricanes finally got over that second round hump, made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then just absolutely got wiped. We're not going to talk about that. the New Jersey Devils coming out of nowhere, being
Absolutely.
potentially the scariest team over the next 5 to 7 years or so.
And you get Tyler Toffoli and Timo Meier over the offseason. What is this?
And you still have that rough brand of hockey from teams like the New York Islanders that are just going to make it not fun to play against night in and night out.
And Ilya Sorokin's a freak of nature. I mean, honestly, it's ridiculous.
I mean, look at just between the two New York teams, you have Ilya Sorokin and Igor Shesterkin, like two of arguably the best goaltenders in the league right now. Why would you think that you're going to jump in and immediately have success against those two teams? But everybody that we just mentioned, like obviously Columbus is on the low end. We're not expecting anything from them. Washington's rebuilding. Unless Ovechkin is going to score 80 goals a season, I don't know that they're going to be super hopeful for playoff success either. But I mean, I look at this and I'm excited for Pittsburgh because it has given them some vitality. It's given them some life.
It gives you
to a team
go up to the rink.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a big offseason acquisition for them. Like there's so much to be excited about here, but I think they're done for this offseason. And I don't think that they have done enough to remedy the issues. You're probably right. Maybe they squeak in as a wild card into this playoff and then get trounced in the first round by a better team like the Devils or the Rangers or the Maple Leafs or the Lightning or somebody. But I don't know. Where do you go from here if you're Kyle Dubas and you just scored probably the biggest offseason acquisition? What's your game plan for this coming season going into next?
I will be honest with you. I don't even have a legitimate answer to that. I've been asking myself that same question this entire offseason. My dad's a huge Penguins fan, so we talk about it as often as humanly possible. But, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you've got at least 2 or 3 years worth of possibly doing well, but you have got a bottom-of-the-barrel prospect pool in Pittsburgh. You do not have many players that are going to be breaking out anytime soon in the way that a Crosby or a Mal.
And your draft pick situation isn't great either.
No.
They haven't had first-round picks. There was a stretch for like 5 years where they didn't have a first-round pick.
Exactly.
And the foreseeable future isn't better for them. Next year, round 2, 4, 6, and 7. Okay. Then 25 and 26, they start to get a more full draft pool together.
Yes.
But again, if you're Kyle Dubas and you're trying to stave off a rebuild, who's to say that he's not going to trade away first-round picks over the next few years in order to acquire some more free agents that are going to help give them that push?
Exactly. And the big thing about this is, in my opinion, you are going to need to do some serious retooling in 25, 26 to actually make yourself any kind of relevant as far as the Penguins are concerned. It is looking real. I mean, even your bottom 6 defensemen, you've got P.O. Joseph, who is, in my opinion, a very good up-and-coming defenseman. He's probably their best young player, in my opinion. And you've got Chad Ruhwedel, who is Chad Ruhwedel, and a 33-year-old Chad Ruhwedel at that. You're in a bit of a world of hurt. And for anybody listening that doesn't know really ages of hockey players, by the time that you're about 33 to 35, you are on a steady kind of decline. By the time that you turn 35, you are considered to be getting older. By the time you're 36, 37, it's getting to be about that time to start thinking about.
You better be legendary.
Exactly. You've got to be Crosby. You've got to be Ovechkin. You've got to be Steven Stamkos. You've got to be these guys that are absolutely fantastic. And I mean, I think of a guy like Martin St. Louis, who was undersized. I think he hung him up maybe a season or two before. Personally, I would have thought that he would have, only because of his size. If you get laid out of that size at 38 years old, you are in deep, deep trouble. But the thing about it is, there are just not very many players on this team that I think are going to make a gigantic impact past this year, and it's a scary thought. And again, Jake Gensel had ankle surgery 2 days ago and is going to be out for 3 months, which at this point you're going to miss maybe a month of the season. But you never know how he's going to come back, as he's not a spring chicken anymore either. And I mean, if you look at this lineup, it's not bad. I mean, Gensel Crosby is always going to be a nice combination for each other. Raquel's going to be a nice guy on the right, and Riley Smith and Malkin, I think they have a fairly similar style of play. I just don't know how Riley Smith integrates himself into this lineup as far as really from any standpoint. I think he does well, I think he's a good hockey player. I think he's a smart player. He has good IQ. But does he mesh well with this team and his inconsistencies over the years? I just mixed with the fact that Russ just had a very down year last year. Malkin did quite well, but what do you do?
I truly don't know, because I'm experiencing the same thing as I look down just this forward group by itself. Yeah. And I say, who's your X factor there? Like, obviously you have Sidney Crosby. That presence is never going to go away until he finally decides to hang him up. And I mean,
First
Malkin has taken
all day long.
Absolutely. Malkin has taken a step back. Let's just be perfectly honest. There is not a young enough presence on this team that is going to be able to galvanize this forward group in the same way that a younger Sidney Crosby did.
Absolutely.
When he's having an off night, who are you expecting to step up on this team? And usually that question, you're talking about your bottom six. You're talking about your depth players. Who's going to step up and make that impact on any given night? I don't know. I look at these bottom six and I'm like, these are names that I'm familiar with. I've seen them play in a variety of places. I know what they are capable of. And the only one that really jumps to mind for me right now is Nola Chari.
Me too. But that is funny. I feel the same. There's really no one who's going to hit people. I mean, Jeff Carter is like 80 years old. If he gets, he's a very big man, but if he hits somebody, what are his knees going to do? I mean,
no idea. Like, I have to figure that Kyle Dubas is counting on Rem Pitlick to take a giant step forward this year.
Which could happen.
It very well could. And he's positioned to do that because ideally, if you want a younger guy like Rem Pitlick to take a step forward, you're going to want to promise him, hey, we're going to move you up to the third line. Well, is he really going to take over for Lars Eller? Unlikely, so. But you think so? Okay.
I really do. I've been a Capitals guy my whole life. I've seen Lars Eller play. My biggest thing about Lars Eller, it drives me nuts to have to say this, when I see him on a breakaway or if I see him in a scoring position, he sees that goalie's crest and he shoots right into the dead center of it. He is a goalie crest hitting machine.
Yeah, that's fair. But a guy like Rem Pitlick, he's positioned well that if he never moves off the fourth line this season, great. He's still young and he's had opportunity to show what he can do. So going into next off season, there's probably there's more confidence on the part of Kyle Dubas to say, we took a chance on this kid. He showed that he's got the capability. He's got the potential. What else can we do to help build around maybe him? He's not going to be your generational talent of the future. He's not going to take over for Sidney Crosby at any point in time, but he is going to just be a solid piece moving forward that maybe you help build around. I don't know. But I mean, all of this really does concern the defensive core. And I heard something the other day. I didn't have time to verify, see if this was actually true or not. But supposedly, Chris Letang said that if Erik Karlsson made his way to Pittsburgh, that Letang would step back off of the first power play unit and give that over to Karlsson. So let's assume that that is something he actually said. And let's assume he actually does that. And Letang steps down to power play 2. What does that do? A presence like Erik Karlsson, what does it do for the first power play unit in Pittsburgh?
I'm going to be honest with you. I am deathly afraid of that power play unit. You have got guys who can move the puck around. You got guys that can shoot the puck particularly well. That power play unit with Erik Karlsson on it is absolutely lethal. And I have nothing but good things to say about that group. Even their second line is looking fairly solid, but I'm going to be honest with you. That first power play unit is, and this is without looking at any other lines in the league. This is just just pure off the top. This is a possibly top 5 power play unit in the league. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to have to look into other power play units, but
I'm definitely quoting you on that.
I really hope not. Oh gosh. Erik Karlsson, Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, Raquel as a first power play unit is absolutely bananas. Erik Karlsson, puck moving ability. Malkin has the ability to shoot, pass, do whatever he needs to do as far as vision is concerned. Crosby is generational. He can do anything. And I think he's one of the best players who ever played the game. Jake Gensel is unbelievable, has an unbelievable shot, and he has just an absolutely ridiculous chemistry with Crosby. Raquel is really kind of, I would really say, odd man out in this situation. I feel like he is a good hockey player. He's just not, in my opinion, a caliber of like a Crosby or a Malkin or Karlsson or Gensel, really. But he has a good shot. He has offensive instincts, and he knows what to do with the puck. But that is an absolutely ridiculous first power play unit.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be quite scary. I'm quite confident of that. The only other question I have about Pittsburgh right now is what on earth they're going to do about their goaltending situation. You get rid of Casey DeSmith, and that says that you're going to ride Tristan Jarry. Alex Nedeljkovic looked like he was going to be an answer for a long time, and then he kind of stumbled his way for a few years. So I don't know if I have a tremendous amount of confidence in the Pittsburgh goalie tandem.
Nor do I.
But maybe that's something you address next year. You kind of ride out this tandem and see what actually happens with it. But I mean, it's a fun team to be excited about right now just because of the potential. And there's endless potential there. And I think Erik Karlsson is a fantastic addition. I just can't help but think this is the second time in Erik Karlsson's career that he has been so adopted by a city, a team, a fan base.
Yeah.
And then he's just out. First from Ottawa, now from San Jose. I can only hope that Pittsburgh is going to rally around him the same way that those two cities did, because this is probably where he's finishing his career, right?
It is quite likely. I think so as well. I mean, if you really think about it, the teams that he left were so very successful for so many. I mean, when he got to San Jose, you have Brent Burns and you have a significantly better team. I mean, Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson combination was ridiculous, by the way. But
it's true.
In San Jose, it's such a shame to see him. You know, the injuries that he had happen to him over the early portion of his career there. I'm pulling for the guy. I mean, this is again coming from a Capitals fan about a Penguins person, so it's very difficult for me to say this. I really hope that he has a successful career in Pittsburgh. I've always pulled for Erik Karlsson. I always have thought that he's an outstanding hockey player. He has great vision, great skating, a great shot. There's really very, very little things that he cannot do. I truly hope that he has a good finish to his career with this team, and I really hope that they do have a decent run in the playoffs. And that really just felt awful to say, but I really they've got a great core. They've got a good team. They really do have the capability of doing something special. They have the veteran. I mean, obviously, again, older group, but they have the veteran leadership in the playoffs. I think Crosby is just a machine, no matter what time of the year it is. Like, he's a freak show. But what do they do next year? What do they do the year after is 1,000% the scary part.
I got to highlight this one again real quick from Audrey on Twitch. It says, Erik Karl went from making very hungry caterpillar to checking people on the ice. This man has such a wide range. I adore that comment. Thank you so much, Audrey. I'm right there with you, Kyle, on wishing Erik Karl the best of luck in Pittsburgh. He's such just a likable guy. I don't know anybody that actually hates him. He's one of the most fun personalities in the NHL. You can see it from his interviews and the times he goes to all-star events. He's such a wonderful guy. I wish him nothing but the best, and I hope that Pittsburgh is the right landing spot for him on the tail end of his career here. Now, we're going to make the transition here from one black and yellow team to another. And I kind of hate this because, well, I'm a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and I am contract bound. I'm pretty sure it's the law at this point that I have to despise the Boston Bruins. But
you can even sign that contract and it's official.
Yeah, it's I was about to go off on a tangent. I'll save it for another time because I know we're limited on time today. But I had this thought the other day. I was looking down the recent history of the Boston Bruins. Now, I went on record at the beginning of the playoffs this past season, and I said, wouldn't it be hilarious if we saw another Tampa Bay Lightning, Columbus Blue Jackets situation where Boston walks in after a record-setting year and they just get swept? I didn't honestly think that they would get swept, but I thought it'd be hilarious if they lost to the Florida Panthers. And I thought the meme potential, the Schadenfreude potential, it was there. But that was all bound in this idea of something that myself and a lot of people have been saying for, let's say, the last 4 years or so. we keep on waiting for Boston to be done, for them to finally embrace the rebuild, for the core to age out. And somehow they keep on surviving. They keep on thriving. They keep on adding pieces. I'm wondering if this is the year that actually happens, because let's kind of take the rundown of what has occurred for them just in this offseason. Obviously, they had an early exit from the playoffs. We are well aware of that. Came off a record-breaking season that they will not be able to reproduce this season. I guarantee it. They lost Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno to the Chicago Blackhawks. They lost Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci to retirement. And yeah, those are irreplaceable names, by the way.
100%.
Not only for the sake of just what they brought to the ice, but the team chemistry, the community effect. Like, those two guys helped define Boston hockey, right?
Without a doubt. Patrice Bergeron is an all-time great. He is the leadership that he brought to that team, even just from the outside looking in, you don't even need to be a hockey fan to know that he was an incredible leader for his team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Boston recently has been parting with some younger pieces to kind of do the same thing that we were talking about with the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals. They just want one more shot. And eventually that pond is going to run dry. And I can't help but feel like this may be the year that it actually happens. Now, I may end up looking like an idiot at the end of this, because I've also been saying that for the previous how many years, but we're running into a somewhat similar situation here. They have so many free agents that are coming up within the next year. A smaller factor, but a factor nonetheless, is the fact that Jeremy Swayman just went through arbitration. Jeremy Swayman deserves to be paid. He is a starting caliber goalie on most teams in the league right now. And they decided that they were going to take him to arbitration. Like, really? I know you have cap concerns, and that's part of the Boston Bruins issue right now as well. But really? Look,
yes.
Look at me with a serious face and say that Linus Ullmark is going to repeat his success from last year. Can't do it.
You can't. And especially the fact that they've been signed for just about, not far off of what Ullmark's yearly AAV is going to be. It is crazy that you would not throw a bag at Jeremy Swayman.
Look, Linus Ullmark for most of his career was a good goalie on bad teams, i.e. Buffalo. But he still showed what his potential was, and then he steps into the Boston organization, and he has that immediate success. Like, that's nothing to shake a stick at. But he's also 30 years old, and you wanted to acquire a guy like that for that last run mentality. You wanted to promote Jeremy Swayman for the sake of, you are the future. You're the goalie we're going to build around whenever we do end up taking a step back and regressing, so on and so forth. I can't imagine if I'm Jeremy Swayman, if I'm in his shoes, I reach this point next season, and let's say that Boston finishes out of playoff contention, like I have the sneaking suspicion that they will. What motivation is there for you as the supposed goalie of the future at 24 years old to re-sign with the Boston Bruins?
In my opinion, it is just the fact that it is the Boston Bruins. They have obviously original six team. Obviously going to try to rebuild and do what they can. Sweeney is, obviously this year is going to be a step back, to say the very, very least. But at the end of the day, you're still the Boston Bruins. You have a certain, I guess, a weight just by the name itself. But otherwise, if we're looking at ages here yet again, they're getting older as far as their top heavy players. Brad Marchand, I believe, is either 35, 36.
35.
Brad Marchand is 35. Charlie Coyle is 31. And let's not, get too crazy about Charlie Coyle. He's a good hockey player. He has inconsistencies. He's not been the most consistent. David Pastrnak, we can't say anything negative about him. If you did, you're just wrong. And
yes,
Pavel Zacha, he had a fantastic season last year coming over to Boston. Jake DeBrusk stepped up in a big way. Trent Frederick, he's your knuckle chucker. He's going to be the guy that's just going to be the guy to just absolutely terrorize teams as far as his physical play. I actually really I think the Morgan Geekie pickup was a sneaky good play. I really like Morgan Geekie. He's a very, very hardworking hockey player. good sense. But at the end of the day, you've got Milan Lucic and James Van Riemsdyk that are replacing who? Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci in a lineup. I mean, not necessarily replacing them as far as position, but adding, subtracting. You're getting these players, losing those players. You are in an absolute world of hurt. You have lost, I mean, let's just call a spade here. At least a top 5 center in the league last year, and probably the best defensive forward of all time in Patrice Bergeron. You lose a very solid player in David Krejci. Look, I like the fact that Jim Montgomery had a great season. I think Jim Montgomery is a fantastic coach. I think he does a great job as far as what he does to make up for what he's lost. But this team, 1,000%, is taking a step back this year. And it could be a couple steps to, they're going to be a borderline almost, I think they're going to be a borderline wild card team even. I don't even know if they make the top 3 in the Atlantic this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. And among the names that neither of us mentioned here, Tyler Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
Who we thought was going to be a slam dunk piece for the Boston Bruins to play alongside David Pastrnak for the foreseeable future.
Great play.
And he's now a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Yes.
I look at the very recent history for Boston. And as much as the Schadenfreude wants to hit for me, and I want to say I'm going to enjoy their demise, and there's part of that that's true, I don't see a lot to be hopeful for with this team, at least not for the same form of success that we got used to last year, which you can treat as kind of an anomaly. But even still, Boston has been hanging around for years and years and years, and you're just waiting for them to take another step. They almost won the cup against the St. Louis Blues. Like, we thought that was going to be their time to break back in again. And then maybe Patrice Bergeron rides off into the sunset after a Stanley Cup win. But look, same kind of deal. And I'll pull up their actual line combinations here. But I look at the Boston Bruins and I say, who's the X factor? Who's going to step up night in, night out? Who are you going to count on besides David Pastrnak to get things done? And I'm kind of struggling to come up with some names here. I mean, JVR, like you said, and Milan Lucic, their culture plays and a bit of fan service plays. If Lucic in particular is a fan service play, but definitely. We also know that Lucic loved playing in Boston, so I get it. But we know that the Boston Bruins play a bare knuckle style of hockey, and then they deal away a guy that's so good at that. Actually, no, they didn't deal away Tyler Bertuzzi. They just didn't re-sign him. What? I don't understand what their front office is thinking right now. And there's a little bit of poetic justice here in the fact that Bruce Cassidy got the axe and then immediately wins a Stanley Cup with a different team.
Hilarious. that was a good little bit of comedy for everyone but Bruins fans.
Yes, exactly. I have this conversation fairly often, and it gets down to something we touched on earlier, that I have long felt that the Atlantic Division right now in this period of hockey is the most competitive division. And that has kept out teams like Buffalo, who are trying to make a resurgence here, and Detroit, who might make a resurgence as well. But the conversation has ultimately come down to this question. You take a team like Buffalo and you say, have they gotten as good as a team like Boston has gotten worse? And this might be the time where the answer to that question is actually yes.
Yep.
Because if you are going to count on your Atlantic Division playoff locks, it's easy for us to say sitting here in August before the season has begun. You're going to count on Toronto and Tampa Bay. You're going to hope for Florida and Boston, because those are the historical names that just has this group of death surrounding it in the playoffs. I don't think it's crazy to say that Boston drops out in favor of Buffalo. What do you think?
I'm going to be really honest. And this is the only reason I say this is that Boston has the veteran presence and a Marchand Pastrnak, and I'm only giving them that just for the sake of it. But I really think they might even be in the same level as a Buffalo, as a Detroit, and as an Ottawa Senators. I really think those guys, all three of those teams may have caught up to Boston because of their just full lack of real offseason pickups. I mean, look, and again, I don't want to bash Charlie Coyle. I think he's a very, very good hockey player, and again, his just the inconsistencies as far as point scoring goes. You've got Charlie Coyle now as your 2C. That is,
yeah. He's a 3C on a good day.
Exactly, and you've got, I mean, Dylan Cousins is your 2C in Buffalo. Who have you got? I mean, you've got, I mean, Tim Stützle is going to be a freak show this season. He's going to be, by and large, better than I think just about every player on this lineup, except for maybe David Pastrnak, who I also think takes a step back this year because of his supporting cast. And you've got, I mean, Dylan Larkin, I would even put better than dang near any player on this offensive team for Boston. And I mean, obviously, again, outside of David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand takes a step back this year. I don't know if it's going to be, you know, a Dylan Larkin-esque season for him, but I'm just going to put money on it and say that Dylan Larkin is going to be better than Brad Marchand as far as points this season, based on the fact that they've got a little bit more going on. And again, Boston has just taken a step back as far as players. They're taking a step back, I mean, almost all the way across the board.
Yeah. I don't think it's crazy to say that at all. I think you're probably seeing the forest for the trees on this one and saying, oh, Boston might actually be in trouble. And what you said about Charlie Coyle is absolutely right. The perfection line is gone, and that's going to have an effect on Pastrnak and Marchand. But a guy like Charlie Coyle moves up because, well, he kind of has to now. Like the same thing that we would say about him as second line center. Would you say that Pavel Zacha is a first line center?
No.
No.
I would say that he's a borderline 1-2C. I don't think he is a standout 1C. I would say that he might be maybe I can't say no, actually. He might be a bottom of the barrel kind of a 1C as far as, you know, 1Cs go in the entirety of the league. But I don't think that he is an it factor guy that's going to really bring David Pastrnak the puck as well as he could. I mean, obviously, Patrice Bergeron is so impossibly difficult to replace a player like that. I mean, especially with the defensive side of the puck, you win faceoffs, 90% of the time? It's ridiculous.
Yep.
And you've got a guy like James Van Riemsdyk on your left wing, on your first line. I mean, this is obviously just projections. This could change, but James Van Riemsdyk is when's the last time he had a good season? When's the last time he was not a minus player? Is probably, I think, the better question.
No idea. It's been quite a long time that JVR has had that kind of relevance, and to shove him into a first line left wing position, trying to play across from David Pastrnak with a largely untested first line center in Pavel Zacha. I don't know. Like, there's still time in this offseason. There are things that can be done, but look, the Bruins, they're right up against the salary cap too. So if they're going to add, they also have to subtract. And I don't know where you start subtracting from a team like this in order to truly get better. Like, you have to start dealing away draft picks. That's the only thing you can do. But then you still have to do something with the contracts that you have in hand. And I don't know. Like, Boston for me is one of those teams. And I kind of put Tampa in the same category as well, that this is kind of the beginning of the end for them. Right? They've had their day in the sun. They've had so much sustained success over the last decade plus. We all knew that eventually it was going to end. Maybe this is the first time that we see cracks in the armor for the Boston squad, and that probably begins with them missing the playoffs this year.
And look, my thing is about the Boston Bruins is
there's never been a better getaway with a great deal on the Hyundai you've always wanted. It's you.
That was scary. I like their defense and I like their goaltending. My biggest thing for them is, their offense. And Jim Montgomery has proven time and time again that he is a defensive kind of a coach. He definitely did that in Dallas when he was there. I mean, you can't really clearly define him as a defensive coach considering the success that they had last year for Boston. But, I mean, you're going to have to make a much more defensive style of play this year. I don't know that they miss the playoffs necessarily, but I don't know that they're not a bubble team. Yeah. I think they're more of a bubble team than they are a sure thing.
With as competitive as the Eastern Conference in general is, I think it's easier to say that is likely they'll miss the playoffs. Because
only based on the fact that there are just juggernauts.
It's entirely possible that you get 5 teams coming out of the Metro of this division, and you have to finish top 3 in the Atlantic to make it. You could say the same thing about the Atlantic. You get 5 teams from the Atlantic. You have to finish top 3 in the Metro. We don't know. We got to see how this season shakes out. But if I'm picking teams that I think are going to make it from the Atlantic, I'm taking Toronto and Tampa and Buffalo and Florida on the wing there. Like, I think they make it back, but I don't see Boston repeating that sort of success. I think now is the time where they're finally going to take a downswing. And, we'll look at this in a year from now and see how wrong I actually was. But, I was right about them in the playoffs. So, you know what? I might be right about this too. And it's not just because I'm a Boston hater.
I really think that it's a likely possibility that they are at best a bubble team this year. Somebody wanted to say hello.
Oh, hello.
And I really do think that it's going to be a possible thing that Boston ends up being. Again, I don't want to. I hate using the word bubble team. That's just kind of a cop out. I really do think that they're going to be a bubble team.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see. Season's long. It hasn't even started yet, but I tend to agree. I don't have a whole lot of hope for that Boston team, and that's me trying to be as objective as possible with this conversation.
Yes.
All right, so we are going to hit our last topic real quick. Somebody clearly needs your attention more than I do right now. And I just want to make a quick mention of this one because I thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was hilarious how much it got blown out of proportion. Mikhail Sergachev, not exactly a vocal individual on the Tampa Bay Lightning squad. If you're going to get some kind of chirping, who are you going to get it from? Nikita Kucherov, of course. And in years past, you're probably going to get it from Corey Perry and Pat Maroon. But Mikhail Sergachev, he's a little bit further down the list, and they're counting on him to step up and kind of be that defenseman of the future when Victor Hedman does eventually retire. But I had to bring this up because this was just so funny to me. Mikhail Sergachev is back in Russia and just doing some off-season fun things right now. And there was apparently a run-in with a reporter that got blown way, way out of proportion here. And the news that came out and that Toronto fans in particular got up in arms over was this quote: "Wow, Toronto wins one series in 19 years, then immediately loses. They deserve no credit. No other team would celebrate such a thing." Now, I know as well as anybody else that English is not Mikhail Sergachev's first language. Okay. And as he accurately points out, and we're going to look at in a second, that mistranslations happen unless you speak the language. And if you're just plugging something into Google Translate, you're going to miss a lot of the context and the nuance. Language is tricky. Like that's always a thing. But he took to Instagram the other day and he clarified that quote. It says, "If you don't speak Russian, don't use Google Translate as your first option and then spread misinformation." I never said it like that. Question was, Toronto played very physical, which got a couple of your defensemen hurt. Is that true? Again, you can kind of see that English is not his first language, just in the way that this is written. And I said, no, it just happens sometimes. People get hurt by accident, and I don't want to give them credit. Reporter says, "Why not give them credit?" He says, "Why? I don't think they deserve them." Reporter, "For the first time in 19 years, past first round. Mikhail Sergachev, here, true, good on them, but didn't go through second round. I don't see a reason to celebrate. Check your sources or find someone who speak the language. Don't be clown." I absolutely love that. And this kind of harkens back to me for the Tampa Bay Cup where they beat Montreal. And Montreal only won one game. And Nikita Kucherov, in classic Nikita Kucherov fashion, after what I can only assume is several cases of beer, gets on the podium and says essentially the same thing. After one game, they were celebrating like they won the Stanley Cup, like big whoop. Are Toronto fans taking this a little bit too personally?
Okay, my question back to that is: do Toronto fans take anything not personally?
That's
How many Toronto fans out there have you seen that are not going to take something like that too much to heart? Toronto fans can be a lot. And I will say, and this kind of goes back to a Radko Gudas quote earlier this offseason, as far as their media situation goes. It is a very, very, very difficult place to play. So personally, if I'm having success in any capacity, in a media market like that, I'm trying to blow myself up as much as humanly possible to make myself as color shining rainbows as humanly possible so I can get some freaking sleep tonight. At the end of the day, they have got so much pressure on that team from a standpoint that, from any standpoint, it is absolutely ridiculous. I never ever want to know how difficult it would be to play in a market like that. I mean, you remember seasons ago, Mitch Marner and Jack Campbell both getting mental coaches because they just, not to use the words couldn't stick it, but it is a difficult place to play. And if you have any sort of success, you're going to want to accentuate that as much as humanly possible. And I think that's just really what kind of comes of this. But at the end of the day, I absolutely love this quote.
Yeah.
I got a hearty laugh of this the first time I had seen this. And I get it. It's, you win one game in 19 years, you have not a whole ton of reason to celebrate, but because of the fact that you just have so much riding on your team and have so many fans that are just absolutely blowing you up, I'm celebrating every little win that I possibly can if I'm Toronto.
Of course. Who on earth wouldn't? Yeah, for the same reason that if I was a Montreal Canadiens fan playing against the Lightning in the Stanley Cup, of course I'm going to celebrate that one win. Nobody thought that you were going to make it that far.
Exactly.
Look, I get it. Toronto, they should absolutely celebrate. I still maintain that one of my favorite things to come out of the Lightning losing to the Maple Leafs in this past offseason was the Toronto faithful reaction. And I want to make sure I put that in all caps, in bold, underlined, the Toronto faithful. Hey, the people that have been waiting decades and decades and decades for any sort of success, that were alive for all 19 years of that playoff drought, that maybe some have actually been alive since 1967 and have not got to see the Maple Leafs do anything substantial since then. Like, it is so not a big deal. And like, absolutely celebrate. I can't fathom being one of those people that gets upset at Mikhail Sergachev for saying this in particular. Like, even if it was exactly what they thought it was that he said, why are you still going to get upset about that? Take your victory, like, just take the old playground, the schoolyard mindset to that and just said, well, we still won, so and go about your day. Like, you think,
stick your head in.
Do you really think a guy like Mikhail Sergachev gives a crap about what any Toronto fan has to say? Like, no. I guarantee that this Instagram story was the result of his agent saying, hey, maybe like just say something about this.
Exactly.
Like, you don't even have to apologize, but like maybe just clarify it. That's all. Like, if this was left up to Sergachev, he probably would have laughed at it and done absolutely nothing else with it. But for some reason, maybe people are just bored in the off season. Like, and quotes like this just get sensationalized and people like to make a big fuss about it. But come on, whenever Tampa and Toronto play this season, do you think that the Maple Leafs are going to be gunning to injure Mikhail Sergachev over this stupid quote?
No.
And
if you are, he's a child. Let's be honest about it. You are that. You are just as much of a child as you can possibly be. I don't think it makes a dang bit of difference, other than maybe bulletin board material for like a week and a half.
Right.
Maybe.
And you put that up during the playoffs.
Exactly.
You don't use that. That doesn't mean a thing to you during the regular season. Toronto's had incredible regular season success for the last 6 years.
Exactly.
They don't need help making the playoffs. They need help making it further in the playoffs. So if you want to use that as ammo, use it in the first round if you're playing against Tampa next year, or the second round, whenever you happen to be seeing Tampa. Like, that's when you bring that in. But for now,
use that 9 to 10 months from now. This is nothing.
It's so stupid. It's silly, and I couldn't help but laugh about it. But because, everything for me ultimately gets back to the Tampa Bay Lightning, I had to make sure that we mentioned it today. So.
That is beautiful. I'm glad you did. Honestly, it's just such a silly thing. I love seeing things get overblown in the offseason, and it happens, and it's going to happen until the end of time, because hockey fans, what do we have to sit on it for the next 2 to 3 months, other than going to your NHL pages and seeing what every single team, the 32 and 32 on NHL. What do you have other than that during the offseason?
You pretty much got nothing. You have that limited span where you have the entry draft and the bulk of the free agency moves happening in the first 2 days, and then you have nothing until preseason. And even during preseason, you pretty much have nothing. Let's be real.
Hurt,
Right.
pain, ow, yes.
Yeah, we have something like 60 days in that ballpark until hockey officially comes back. So, I'm excited, but I'm in the same boat as I sit here and say, what are we going to talk about for the next 2 months? And, I kind of rely on people being stupid like this and making a big deal so we can make fun of them in turn.
Very, very happy this happened.
Yeah, so am I. And you know what? When it comes down to next week, I'm going to have to struggle to find some more things to talk about. And we're going to try to make a much bigger deal of it than it should be, because that's how we're going to survive this as well.
Completely fine with that as well. Gosh darn you, Sergachev, you bum.
Oh, believe me, if any Toronto player dares to respond to this, I'm going to get on my highest of high horses and pretend to be upset about this and just rail against them for 30 straight minutes. Like that seems like it's the appropriate reaction.
You very rude number 98. You.
Yeah. How dare you?
Anyway.
All right. We got to wrap this up. I know Kyle has to go and I do too. For anybody that was tuning in today live, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for the comments. Audrey, especially, gave us a good laugh here right in the middle of it. Yes. Thank you so much. You can catch these replays on YouTube. They will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/SammyFlair, at least until such time that we get a name for ourselves and we start our own channels and we actually get this thing a little bit more off the ground than it currently is. But in the meantime, make sure that you are following me on Twitch so you can get that notification when we do go live. I do my very best to promote it a day in advance when I know it's going to happen, so that way you can ask questions. We didn't have time for any questions today, but we will have some for our next recording, whenever that happens to be, because we don't have a schedule right now. And Kyle and I are going to have to sit down and talk about it and find out when we can do this again.
Yes.
Because life is challenging and difficult at times, and we're not making any money off this. So until we're starting to make money off this, it's hard to justify locking in having one time to do it every single week. But anyway, thank you again so much, everybody, for watching. Check us out on YouTube for all the things that we've done here in the recent past. Kyle, I know you said you were going to start working on some solo content. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to start trying to come up with some recaps and how I think certain teams are going to end up in the playoffs. Again, kind of bringing that NHL.com 32 and 32 up. That's kind of what I'd like to try and do, as far as, come up with some kind of standing of, first lines, who I think is going to finish where. I really think I'm going to start going into depth a little bit with individuals and lines and teams. So it's going to be a really fun experience. I've actually been wanting to do this for a long time, so it's going to be a really
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, I kind of want to start doing the same thing as well. I wore myself out a little bit with the immediate offseason news, particularly around free agency. Like, I was just pumping out content daily. And I got exhausted from doing it. So I would like something where I can put a little bit more time and careful effort into it.
Yes.
I love that idea. I can't wait to see what you come up with, apart from your very obvious prejudice against the Pittsburgh Penguins and is biased for your Washington Capitals.
100%. I try to keep it as minimal as possible, but it didn't work today.
No, it happens to the best and the worst of us. So, I think you're justified in saying that. Anyway, we got to get out of here. Thank you again so much for watching, everybody. Tune in next time. And if you happen to miss this one, check us out on YouTube, drop comments. Let us know how absolutely wrong we are about absolutely everything. We love the comment section. We love just hearing all that you have to say, especially all the negative stuff. We kind of thrive on that. So throw it our way, and we will see you again next week. Take care.
Adieu.
It was a block.